Pope Francis will be the first pope in history to visit Mongolia, but why is he going there? Joining us with the latest from Eternal City, Church Militant Rome correspondent Dr. Jules Gomes. Jules, the Pope's visiting Mongolia. What do we know about this trip?
Brad, this trip has been in the planning for quite some time, and Pope Francis will leave for Mongolia tomorrow, and he will be there until Monday. One thing we know for certain, he's definitely not going there to boldly and loudly proclaim the gospel. So
we have an 86-year-old Pope who needs a wheelchair and who's worried about carbon emissions from aircrafts. You know, he's going all the way to Mongolia. That's a carbon footprint going on there. Who will be at the meeting? Who will he be meeting there?
Now, he's going to meet government officials. He's going to engage in interfaith dialogue with the Buddhist community. Remember, Buddhism is Mongolia's dominant religion. There is a very, very tiny Catholic community of just 1,450 Catholics. I mean, you can take these Catholics and put them into St. Peter's Cathedral, St. Peter's Basilica, and you can take multiply them by 10 or 12, and you still won't fill the basilica. So it's that small a community. He's also going there to engage with, he believes in engaging with people on the peripheries, and that's one reason the Vatican is giving for his apostolic journey to Mongolia.
Now, Pope Francis just named a cardinal there. Was it last year? Can you tell us about that?
A couple of years ago, Cardinal Giorgio Marengo, who is an Italian and who was appointed as, he's a consolata missionary. He was appointed to be a bishop and then elevated to the cardinalate by Pope Francis. Now, very interestingly, by the way, Brad, we did a story a couple of months ago about one of his colleagues, one of Marengo's colleagues, also an Italian missionary to the Yanomami tribe in the Amazon. And this chap proudly proclaims that they have never converted the indigenous people of that tribe, never preached the gospel. And it seems like Giorgio Marengo doesn't seem to be too hot on converting Mongolians to Christianity.
You know, that's kind of like a football coach proudly proclaiming, you know, we've never won a football game in the history of this football league. It's beyond the mind. How does the Catholic Church's stats there compare to other Christian denominations, and have they remained small or are they growing?
That's a very good question. I've been reading a doctoral dissertation on missionary work in Mongolia, and it makes very interesting reading because there are dozens of Protestant evangelical, charismatic churches there. And they have experienced a growth of 7.9% compared to global growth in Protestant evangelical Christianity, which is 2.9%. The growth of Christianity in Mongolia among evangelical Christians is significant. But what is also significant is because the Catholic Church doesn't seem to be doing evangelism. There are very few indigenous Mongolian Catholics, even though, remember, the Nestorians in the 12th and 13th centuries were great missionaries, even though their doctrine was not spot on. And we have just 2 indigenous Mongolian priests. About 760 Mongolians have been baptized as Catholics, but you have a very, thriving and very evangelistically minded communities of Protestants in that region.
And along this line, Jules, last year a world-famous Protestant evangelist preached the gospel to thousands in Mongolia. And now a year later, Pope Francis is visiting this predominantly Buddhist country. Do you think Pope Francis is following in the footsteps of this Protestant preacher, and can you tell us about him?
Well, Franklin Graham was in Mongolia exactly 1 year ago. He went there in September. He preached for 2 nights. Over 17,000 Mongolians came to hear him. He was very direct. He told them, you need Jesus Christ. He is the only way to God. Franklin Graham, of course, we know, is the son of the very famous American evangelist Billy Graham. And thousands of people responded, were baptized, joined these evangelical local churches. About 250 churches got together to stage Franklin Graham's evangelistic visit. So there is a real interest in the gospel. People are hungry there. I have contacts from the northeast of India who have been crossing the mountains and penetrating Mongolia as missionaries there. But it's very sad that this tiny Catholic church doesn't seem to be interested in evangelism. And in fact, Marengo, when asked why Pope Francis is coming there, Cardinal Marengo said he's coming to whisper the gospel. As if it's something to be ashamed of. It's like a dirty secret you don't want everybody to know about, rather than it being the greatest news ever in history in the world.
So if he's whispering, is that going to amount to preaching Christ to the non-Christians in Mongolia as Franklin Graham did?
Well, I'll eat my hat if that happens. I've got about 10 hats there. It's going to take me some time to get through them. But Pope Francis is not particularly known for preaching the gospel. He considers preaching the gospel to be a form of proselytism. And therefore, it's going to be engaging in interfaith dialogue with these Buddhists, because he's done it with Muslims, and now it's an opportunity to reach out to the Buddhists. You can see the Buddhist monks in that picture. They came to the Vatican and visited the Vatican last year, and in fact the Mongolian ambassador to the Holy See has been very clear about this. She said, words to the effect that we don't want preaching of the gospel here. We want people to come. We want the Pope to come and engage in interfaith dialogue so that we can all live peacefully in harmony together, and we can enjoy the diversity of religions, which of course Pope Francis is very happy to cater to.
Let's just step aside for just a second, Jules. How does interfaith, what's the goal of interfaith dialogue? I mean, what's the mechanics of that? What's it actually about or trying to accomplish or go about? Or can you help our viewers? We throw that term around there. What does that mean?
Brad, this has been going on, for example, in India. I know the situation on the ground there ever since the Second Vatican Council. Now, you ask priests who are engaged in interfaith dialogue. I've spoken to a number of them in Rome from the dicastery of, interfaith, whatever. And they're very clear. They say that it is not to convert people to Christianity or to Catholicism. It is to help to gain deeper clarity into what we believe. It is to build bridges. Of course, the bridges, they wouldn't want someone to cross the bridge and come over to the church and be baptized. But it's sort of, it has no goal except that people can feel nice about themselves, enjoy a nice cup of tea, and cucumber sandwiches, as we would say in England. But it really has no goal. And like ecumenism, it's kind of the old Beatles song, he's a real nowhere man, sitting in his nowhere land, making all his nowhere plans for nobody. Whereas Jesus was very specific, go out into the whole world and preach the good news. Whoever believes and is baptized will be saved.
Somehow, ecumenism stopped being you-come-in-ism within the Catholic framework there. Jules, does this visit have, of Pope Francis to Mongolia, does it have geopolitical implications?
Now, that is, again, a very interesting question, because there have been noises in the media, wondering what Russia will say and what China will say, what Putin will say and what Xi will say. And Francis has made overtures at the moment, particularly to Russia. wondering whether he could maybe stop over and have a chat with Patriarch Kirill. All these are, all this is talk, nothing concrete. But as you rightly said, Mongolia is sandwiched between China and between Russia, and symbolically, Francis could be sending out some sort of a message, perhaps a ministry of presence, prophetic presence, through his apostolic visit to Mongolia.
We'll have to wait and see how things roll out on the geopolitical front here in the next several months. Jules, one final question. Does it seem in any way odd to you that Pope Francis his visit's been planned, but it seems to be kind of sudden for many people, that he is visiting a place that is sandwiched between communist China and Russia, where it was a former satellite of Russia, where almost no Catholics are? Is there anything odd about that?
Now, before I answer that question, let me add that Pope Francis has just made a big diplomatic disaster. On the 25th, he gave a talk to Russian youth in St. Catherine's Cathedral via video link. And he, typical Francis, at the end of his speech, he went on, he improvised, and his off-the-cuff remarks basically praised Russian history, heritage, and culture, including Catherine II of Russia, who was very favorable to the Catholic Church, and then Peter the Great, I think, who was very anti-Catholic. And Archbishop Shevchuk, Sviatoslav Shevchuk of the Ukraine Greek Catholic Archbishop, was outraged that Pope Francis would, side with Russia. So the Vatican has been spending its time in the last couple of days trying to iron out this diplomatic fiasco. But coming to your question about why is he going there? It is in accord with Francis's philosophy of going to the margins, to the peripheries. That is one reason why he appointed Archbishop Marengo as cardinal, because this was a nobody in nowhere land who needed to be brought to the center. This is part of Pope Francis's philosophy, his ideology, and now he also wants to affirm, that is what we are told, this very, very small, tiny, marginal Catholic community in Mongolia. Again, finally, this is the first time a pope will be setting foot on Mongolian soil, and he's accomplishing what his predecessors have not accomplished in history. Of course, he will not be preaching Jesus as the only Lord and Savior, which his predecessors might have done.
Wouldn't want to proselytize, Jules. So, well, Pope Francis will be making history this weekend with a trip to Mongolia, the former satellite of the Soviet Union. Questions as to the timing of this visit and what he hopes to accomplish there still remain unanswered. But many Catholics are wondering if he will make a stop in Moscow on his return flight to Rome. And that would be a historic first as well, and would raise the eyebrows of many for many reasons. Jules, thank you so much for your dispatch and your follow-up remarks.
Thank you, Brad.